Hey guys, this is Adam with TAT Express, and today I'm going to show you how to do a wheel seal on an 18-wheeler. We've had a lot of comments on this particular topic, so here it is. I hope you like it. I hope you learned something. Make sure to subscribe to us if you haven't subscribed to us yet, and hit that notification bell so you know next time we release another video. Let's get right into this.
I came from the mud, there's dirt on my hands. Strong like a tree, there's roots where I stand. Oh, I've been running from the law.
Okay guys, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the wheels off. You want to make sure the truck is secure. You got chocks on it, it's on jack stands. So we got all that done already, and so I'm going to go ahead and get these wheels off.
Welcome to forever, man. Let's go. Go! It's forever. No surrender. Yeah.
Okay, so I have the wheels off. The next thing we're going to do is remove the brake drum. For this particular brake, as you can see, it's just a 30 brake chamber. If you want to check out my how to do brakes on an 18-wheeler video, they had a 30-30 brake chamber, which is a larger brake chamber. Those particular brake chambers, you will have to release the brakes in the cab before backing the brakes off. But since this is just a 30 brake chamber, this is only for whenever you actually push the brakes. So since it's not a parking brake, we don't have to release the brakes in the truck. I'm going to go ahead and back the brakes off so I can get this drum off.
Welcome to forever, man.
So I'm gonna release the brakes here. So I got the tool here. What you wanna do is back this brake off all the way. You're gonna be able to see the drum and the brake shoe. The gap is just gonna get larger. You wanna get it backed up enough so you can get that drum off. So right there is good. So I got that there. Let's go ahead and get this drum off so we can get this hub off, okay? So I'm gonna knock the drum loose. Get the drum off. Drop it right there. Okay, so the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take these bolts off so I can get this axle out, and then I'll be able to get these nuts off so that I can pull this hub assembly off here. Now this wheel seal is actually not leaking. I'm just doing this video for demonstration purposes, okay? So I'm gonna put some WD-40 here so I can work these loose. These are gonna be a 15/16 deep socket. You can get it off with an impact. So let me get that ready so I can get those knocked out. Okay, so we're gonna get the impact, 1/2-inch impact. Now, I thought it was a 15/16, but this is actually 1 1/8. So let's get these off.
Welcome to forever, man. Let's go.
There's going to be a washer as well here. Get those off.
No surrender. Yeah. You know that this right here forever. And there will be no surrender.
Now that we got those off, I'm going to work on getting this axle out. Okay, so I got a drop pan here to catch the oil. I'm going to go ahead and remove these washers here so I can get this axle off. Now there's different types of axles. If you have one with wedges, you're going to have to strike it here in the center. Since this one doesn't have wedges, I'm just going to strike it here around the edges. It does have silicone, so it should come off pretty easy. There it goes. So you go ahead and get this axle pulled out. You want to be careful because at the end of the axle, you got teeth on here. These teeth, if you drop this axle and damage these teeth, you won't be able to get it stuck back in the differential. So put this in a safe place so it doesn't fall over. Usually I lay it up against the truck here. Let me grab a towel. You can use a towel or any rag to wrap around the gear area just to keep it secured. Make sure it's not going to fall over. Here is leaning up against the truck, so it's not going to fall over. The next item we're going to be doing now is we're going to be removing this inner nut or this outer nut so that we can get this spindle off. Now, if you can look at this type of nut, the outer nut's always going to have some kind of locking device. There's different models on these locking, but this is very important to know what type of locking nut you're dealing with, because, for example, this locking nut has locking tabs on the side. So when you actually install the socket, it's going to pinch these locking tabs together so that you can actually rotate this out. So if you're not using the right socket size, you're going to break this. You can break these locks here, and then when you go back on with it, you can have issues later on down the road because you're not going to be able to have this this nut staying on there secure. Tighten these down to specs and making sure they don't back out is very important. I see a lot of failures where this lock nut is not working correctly or not installed correctly, and over time what happens is this nut starts to back out, and then you have all this wheel play, and it's very dangerous because if this hub comes off the spindle, it's going to take all the tires with it. It's going to take these two tires that are bolted up to it. So you can imagine the damage that can cause. It's not only going to tear up the spindle, but it can go, it can actually detach from the truck and be very, very hazardous on the road. So I'm going to grab the right socket for this so that I can pinch these tabs in, and then I'm going to take this lock nut out. When you take this lock nut out, you're going to have an outer bearing and an inner bearing. When you pull these bearings out, you want to wrap them up with a towel, keep them secure from dirt, because if they're good and you want to reuse them, you want to make sure there's not a lot of dirt. You don't collect a lot of dirt onto the bearing, and then when you reinstall it, you're going to cause some damage. So let me get the socket so I can get this nut off, and then we'll be able to get these bearings out. I'll pull the hub off, and we'll get that seal off. So let's get on to that next. Okay, so I have the socket. Now, as I mentioned, these locking tabs here, you're going to be able to tell if this is the right size because it's going to push against those locking tabs. And I'll show you how these locking tabs work once I get it off here. Looks like it's spinning already pretty easily. All right, so I got the lock nut off. I want to show you how this works. So there's a key on this. There's a keyway here on this particular nut, and this keyway is going to go into this axle right here. So as you can see on the side of this, there's going to be notches. So as I mentioned, when I pull this off, these lock tabs go into those notches, and with this keyway, it's going to keep this nut from backing out. Now there's different types of lock nuts, as I mentioned, so make sure to examine what type of lock nut you're dealing with, and make sure that you're going to reinstall it correctly and that there's no damage, because this is a major component here. This is what keeps everything together. So now that I have this off, we're going to get this outer bearing off. I'm going to have a towel ready, and I'm just going to shake this, and you can see how that popped right out. So I'm going to move it a little bit more, try to get this bearing out of there. So this is the outer bearing. When you get the outer bearing out, you want to go ahead and inspect it. You want to look for any pitting, any scars. As you can see, this bearing is pretty clean, so we're going to reuse this bearing. And as I mentioned, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up with a towel so that it doesn't get any contaminants on it, dirt, anything like that. Keep that there. As I mentioned, if you're going to be really using those, make sure to cover them up. So now the inner bearing is going to be on the inside of the wheel seal, so that one's not going to fall out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this off so I can get this wheel seal removed. So what I'm going to do is just shake this off until it comes off. So as you can see, it come off pretty easy. All right, so we got that off there. Now another item I didn't mention here, this is a spacer. These are newer designs, so basically what this is you can torque this down as tight as you need to without having to worry about binding up the bearings. So this is a newer style spacer here, so that's installed there. The reason it was kind of tough to come off is sometimes this inner bearing where it rides right here, it can get cocked to the side, or it can get moved, or when you're trying to pull it off, it can come off sideways. So it can be a little bit of a pain to get it off. So you kind of want to work it your way, jiggle it around, make sure that bearing is in an even position so it can come right off of there. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set it up so I can get this wheel seal off here, and then we'll get that wheel seal replaced. So let's move on to that. So even though I got a drop pan here, I'm gonna get another drop pan, and I'm gonna put my drum in there. And this is so I don't get any oil on the ground. So I'm gonna use my drum to secure my hub, just like that. Okay, this just makes it a little bit easier to work with. It secures the hub so that I can get that wheel seal out. Now there's gonna be different tools that you can buy to get these seals out. I have a seal remover, but usually I use an adjustable pry bar and just see if I can get it out with that. If I don't, then I'll work it out. So what you want to do is just get on that lip, and you want to peel this seal out. You know how I got up under this lip? I'm gonna peel this seal right out of there like that. Now I got that seal just out of there just like that. And that's why I use the drum, so I can get more leverage to get that seal out. If you don't have this hub secured, you can be fighting with this to get this wheel seal out. So I got that out. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and pull this bearing out. This is the inner bearing. We're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna do an inspection on it. Everything looks good. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this bearing up. Make sure it doesn't get contaminated with any dirt. We're gonna reuse these bearings. So got it wrapped up here. I'll go ahead and put it over here with my other bearing. So now that we got the wheel seal off, the bearings look good. We're not having to replace any races. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna clean where the wheel seal actually seals. I'm gonna clean it with some light sandpaper, get some brake cleaner, clean it off. Also, I'm gonna get this tone wheel cleaned off as well, just so that my ABS can read correctly. So let me get the sandpaper and some brake cleaner so we can get this cleaned up. I'm gonna grab the new seal and we'll get it installed. All right, as I mentioned, we're gonna clean up now. I'm gonna go ahead and get as much off here. You wanna get all the sealing, existing sealing off there. So I'm gonna get as much as I can off with a rag, and then I'm gonna knock the rest off with this grinder. I know I said sandpaper. This is like sandpaper. It's a little bit faster. So what I'm gonna do is just clean up the sealing surfaces here. Make sure you don't take off any metal. You just wanna take off old sealant, any rust. All right, now that I got that cleaned off, I'm gonna clean all this off here. Let me get the brake cleaner. I'm gonna go ahead and get the rest of it cleaned up with brake cleaner, and then we can install the seal. All right, so I just kind of blow it off a little bit to get excess dirt off. We're gonna clean it up still with brake cleaner. You can see how dirty it still is, so make sure to use brake cleaner to clean up just the sealing surfaces here. So once you get the sealing surfaces all cleaned up, we're gonna go ahead and install. Now, one thing you don't wanna forget is this inner bearing. I see this a lot. I've seen it done a couple of times where they put the seal on and they don't put this bearing back in here. So make sure you set your bearing back in there before installing the seal, because you won't be able to put that bearing in there once that seal is installed. Now, there's gonna be multiple different tools that you can buy to install these seals. Usually, we use this plate here. It's actually a Stemco plate, but we don't have the bar on it, so we just use the actual plate. Now, I'm gonna set the seal on here, set it in place, and then when you install these seals, you wanna strike it so that it's going in evenly. As you can see, this lower end's already down over here, so I'm gonna try to put this seal as even as possible here. Now I can see, now I move my lower end to this side. So what I'm gonna do, since my lower end's on this side, I'm gonna start tapping the high end side so that I can drive this seal in evenly. So here we go. Once I got this side in, kind of the same, I'm working my way around it. You can see I got this side in here. Everything looks pretty level. Then I can go ahead and start driving it in even further. You want to drive this evenly until it stops. So you can hear the difference there. Once I hit actual bottomed out, you can hear the difference in the hammer. So you don't want to go any further than that. You can damage the seal. So the seal's installed, the bearing's in there. We want to make sure the seal's rotating so everything looks good. So now we're ready to put this hub back on, put the bearings back on, the spacer back on, torque everything down, and we'll be good to go. So let's move on to that next. Okay, so we're gonna go back in with the hub. What I'm gonna do is clean off this sealing surface here. This is the area where the seal actually seals on the spindle. So we're gonna clean this off here, make sure there's nothing on there. If this seal was leaking and you had drenched brake pads, what I mean by drenched is brake pads that are soaked with oil, drums that are soaked with oil, it's gonna be best just to replace those components. These pads, what they'll end up doing is they'll soak up that oil. So even if you try to clean these brake pads off with brake cleaner, it's still not gonna be a good brake. With the heat and everything, what happens is the face of the brake pad will seal and it'll harden. So you won't get actually any braking done. So I got this cleaned up. Let's go ahead and put this hub back on so we can get everything back installed. So I'm gonna pull the hub off the brake drum. I'm gonna get it ready. You wanna have some gear oil ready. So I got gear oil over here ready. I'm gonna go ahead and put this hub back on here. All right, so the hub's on there. You're not gonna drive that seal all the way in. First thing you wanna do, now this is not Lucas, this is actually an old bottle of Lucas, but I have gear oil in here. So we're gonna fill up the hub. We're gonna fill this hub up so it has enough oil. So once it's filled up, you'll see it start running out a little bit. So once it's running out, then we can go ahead and start putting our bearings and all our hardware together. Now, don't forget the spacer. The spacer goes first. And then we go with the bearing in here. All right, now you got the bearing on there. Now we got our lock nut. Remember, we have to put the socket on this so it disengages. Line up your key with the keyway on the spindle. Now, as you remember, I was able to get this spinning quite a few times without it getting binded. So you want to have that same installation. Make sure it's not binding right away. Now, the reason why I put oil in there before installing everything is it's dry. Of course, we had the hub off. We had it over there on the brake drum, and all the oil drains out the hub. The hub has an area where oil sits in here. Now, if you don't fill it and you let the customer leave or the truck goes down the road, it's going to take time for that oil to make its way from the differential over here to your hubs. So in that time, this bearing could get hot. You can cause scarring. You can cause damage to the bearing. So this is why you always want to put oil in the hub when you actually during installation, so you don't run these bearings dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drive this in, and then I'm going to get the torque wrench and then I'm going to torque it down. So let's go ahead and tighten this down so this seal is going to be sitting all the way. So I'm going to tighten this down all the way, and you're going to see that hub working its way back over here. You can see the hub working its way back. You can see right here where the hub is just working slowly going in there. Go ahead and rotate the hub so you don't feel any binding. Rotate it. Make sure you have You know, it's not going to be super free. It's just a small tension. Since it has that spacer in there, as I mentioned, we're going to torque this to specs on the outside. But right now, I'm just going to make sure it's set all the way and that nothing's binding. So I got that as tight as I can get it. I'm going to go ahead and grab the torque wrench and get that torque down. So let me go ahead and get that done. All right, so I got the torque wrench. As I mentioned, with this particular spacer, we're going to be able to torque this down pretty tight. So this is about 300 foot-pounds of torque that we're going to put on this. And with that spacer, it's not going to allow that bearing to bind up. So let me go ahead and tighten this down, and then we can finish assembly here. All right, that's 300 there. So once you pull that socket off, let's go ahead and inspect to make sure that those spacers or those locks came into a good spot. Okay, so as you can see here, it's probably going to be tough to see here, but this it's not locked in there. Now, even with any other spacer or any other lock nut, any type of locking device, you may have to go tighter. Most of the time, if you have a spacer in place, you can go tighter instead of going looser. You want to go ahead and rotate it. It's not binded, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and see if I can rotate this just a little bit more so that I can get that locking tab into that hole like it's supposed to. So let's go ahead and do that next. Okay, so as you can see here, the locking tab is in place. Top, bottom looks like it still needs a little bit of movement there. Okay, so I finally got these lined up here. You can see the top one here is lined up. Also the bottom one, you can see it sticking out there. So that's what you want to see. You want to make sure these nuts are locked in. So now we're going to clean the axle back up and put some silicone on it and then reinstall it. And we'll be ready to get back with the drum and the tires. All right, so now we're going to reinstall the axle. I'm going to clean all this old silicone up off this axle before I install it. All right, we're just gonna go back on just like we came off with all these nuts, washers installed. All right, you're just gonna tighten these down in the star pattern. All right, only thing that's left now is putting the drum back on and putting the wheels back on. Okay guys, so we got everything back together. We adjusted brakes, we got the wheels back on, everything's back together. That's how you do a wheel seal on a semi truck. If you got any questions or concerns, please leave us a comment below. If you got any questions during the week, you can email us at info@tatexpressinc.com. You can also call us at 972-225-3017. Guys, thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't subscribed to us yet, and hit that notification bell so you know next time we release another video. So until next time, guys, be safe.
I came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands.